Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 43 of the World of Sports podcast. I am your host, Diego Sandoval, joined as always by my co host, Logan Ring. Logan, say what's up to the people.
What's up, everybody?
And before we get started, this episode could get, sketchy. We've got a weird internet situation going on with Logan, so there is a possibility that he'll disappear at some
Yes.
point in this
Cox
episode.
is fixing my neighborhood's Wi-Fi or something, so hopefully they're on lunch break right now. But if they come back and I disappear, that's why.
Yeah, and if it's far enough into the episode, I'll just take over and finish it like old times. But we've actually got a couple things that I think are really exciting, really fun to talk about right now, and it's a huge topic of discussion. And the first one is just the whole sticky stuff, the situation with the MLB, and how they've approached the use of sticky stuff with pitchers this year. And then we're going to talk about the NBA injury situation this season. As you know, we're entering in the next week. The conference finals are going to start, and it's just been a huge wave of injuries towards the end of this season, which you always hate to see. But we're going to talk about that a bit later. Before we jump into it, again, follow us on all of our social medias, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Going to get those back up and running and post regularly. You know, it's summer, getting back into the swing of summer rather than school. So hopefully get more stuff in the future. I want to try to do this podcast in person. Again, we're going to need to get some things to make that happen, but we will see. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Apple Podcast, Spotify, give us a like, give us a rating, give us a follow. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Try to get this kind of a shorter episode, most likely, kind of get it quick, let's start with MLB's sticky stuff situation. And just before we get into what we think about it, this last week, the MLB gave an announcement saying that they are going to start cracking down on the use of sticky stuff by MLB pitchers this Monday. So right now it's Friday, June 18th. The rules will go into effect on the 21st on Monday. And it's basically umpires are allowed to throw a pitcher out of a game and give them a 10-game suspension if they think that sticky stuff is being used. And part of the problem is they don't really know what qualifies as sticky stuff. It's kind of just umpires have it's just based on what they think, and they can choose what sticky stuff is. Um, we've had, guys like Trevor Bauer, Garrett Cole, Tyler Glass now, like the best pitchers in the MLB come out and say, "Yeah, we're using it. Everybody is." But that's because nobody told us we can't use it, which I mean, you can't really
Yeah.
blame them if they're not getting punished for it. They should have. If there's no rule in place that's being enforced, you can't hold it against them for using it.
Yeah. And that, like, the whole, I guess, rule that the MLB just made is like the most vague thing ever. And that's what a lot of the pitchers are complaining about is like, yeah, you came out with this new rule, but like it doesn't really mean anything because if a umpire just says you have sticky stuff, like everybody's gonna have some sort of sticky stuff and they can just throw you out of the game. Um, and like pitchers have always used something because I don't know. I mean, I think you watched the Trevor Bauer video when he came out and he was holding the ball like right under his
Yeah.
palm and it wasn't coming off, and that was pine tar and sunscreen or
No,
something,
it
or
was
sweat.
it was sweat and rosin, and he was
Yeah,
saying, "What you can't like do anything about guys sweating, and also you
yeah,
give rosin on the mound." So
yeah. They give you those two things, and that makes it so sticky. So like, I understand if you're gonna make rules and say you can't use these certain substances, but that is like the most vague thing you give, and it's just gonna cause more confusion, and more people are gonna be mad at you for, I don't know, doing whatever. If someone thinks you have sticky stuff on your hand, then they can just say you do or not, and that's just up to the umpire. And you need a more clear rule to, I guess, say what is right and wrong for that.
yeah, so this is an MLB baseball, right? And what pitchers are saying is that the ball is just straight up not, you can't do anything with it with just the ball. Which I mean, I get because the way they make MLB baseballs is that the laces are very kind of compressed into the ball, and you might see if like on a little league ball or a high school ball, the laces are much more prominent so that pitchers can get a grip on the ball. But with the MLB, you really can't do much with it. Like you have to be very talented and to know what you're doing without having any kind of help. And that's part of the thing that Tyler Glasnow was saying was like that you need something because the way that the ball is made and the way that pitchers are taught to pitch, you're not meant to grip the ball as hard as you can, which is, part of he actually got injured. He's going to be out for the season. So rest in peace, my AL Cy Young prediction. But that's what he went one game where he just had nothing. And he said he had to grip the ball like 5 times, harder. And it just made all these muscles sore, and he ended up with a partial UCL tear, which, as we know, is the worst injury for a pitcher to have. So my main thing with it is it's fine if MLB wants to do something about it, like cool, like you can't really stop them from it, but you cannot do it in the middle of June. It's just
Yeah.
these pitchers for 2 months now of the season basically have been pitching because at the beginning of the season they were told do what you want to do, basically just don't be like obvious about it. And that's what I mean. It's safe to say that at least 90% of pitchers in the MLB do it. So you just can't do something like this. First off, like you said, I completely agree that this rule is just way too vague for something that is so important and that impacts the game so much. You can't just go out and say, oh, umpires can do it if they think it looks sketchy. It's like
Yeah.
you have to be able to have like I don't know what the solution is. um have like an expert. I don't know if there's experts on this stuff, or just change the ball, do something, help pitchers out, because what we saw, the trend for the last throughout the 2010s was home runs going up, pitchers ERA going up, strikeouts going up, but it was kind of hitter dominated as we kind of kept going. But in the last 2 years, you know, kind of pioneered by Trevor Bauer. I don't know. He definitely wasn't like the first one to do it, but he's been kind of the most forward about it. He kind of led this whole spin rate revolution thing. And this year, we talked about it a couple podcasts ago, just the fact that pitchers are absolutely dominating the game. And so now we're in a spot where you want pitchers to pitch well, but then you also don't want it to be unfair to hitters. So, I liked what Trevor Bauer said. His whole thing that I guess he's been preaching to the MLB for a couple of years is to basically make the balls more grippy. So like it just makes sure that pitchers don't have to go out of their way to do something about it, which is basically the problem here. So if I guess you'd have to just change the baseball, which again is nothing. You can't do that in June. So I get that MLB is doing its best, but it's in the middle of June. Like you can't. You just got to write it out, in my opinion.
Yeah. MLB doing its best has been not very good for the
Yeah.
past few years. And I think there just needs to be a lot more communication and compromise between the players and I guess all of the MLB. Because like Trevor Bauer said, for I think 3 or 4 years, he's been talking about this and he's been saying that pitchers are cheating. They're doing this. Either make it like a fair playing field and say what you can and can't use, or just completely like ban it. And they didn't do anything for a couple years. So he was very outspoken, and he like you said, he led the spin rate revolution or whatever, where he's been the most outspoken cheater, I guess, even though everybody else was cheating before. And now MLB is like blaming him for it, which is really frustrating. But anyways, like he's actually has like a plan for this, and he's laid out steps of like, you do this to the ball so all of them are the same. You swab the pitcher's hand after to make sure he doesn't have anything else on it. and like there's actual steps that he has made, and the MLB has just come out and basically said, no, we're just going to say this rule instead. We know that you said this to us, but we're just going to give this very vague rule, and then this is going to lead to a bunch of other problems. We told you guys that nothing would change until the end of the year, but now we're just going to do it. And it's just a terrible look for them, and it's going to cause injuries. Um, yeah, I would just be so frustrated if I was a pitcher, because it's just not a lot of transparency going on.
And from what I've seen in terms of like interviews and stuff, hitters are okay with it. Like hitters understand how tough it is to pitch in the MLB, and they know they throw balls, they play in the field, so they understand it. And it's not like, yes, pitchers were somewhat dominating the beginning of this year, but hitters are still able to hit the ball if the pitchers are using something. So
Yeah.
it's not it's yes, if in certain circumstances, and if it's used too much, it's definitely an unfair playing field. But I think the pitchers need to get some leeway in this, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's MLB
And
is
it's not the same thing exactly, but it can almost be compared like slightly to like using pine tar to like grip your bat or something. Like there's a certain part of it where it's like just control. Like it's not to try to get a competitive advantage, it's just to hold the ball. And
right.
yes, spin rate comes from that. So if they're using other stuff like, I don't remember, spider tack or whatever,
Yeah,
yeah, maybe that's cheating because that's going a little overboard. But part of it can just be compared to control, and like batters want the pitchers to have control because they don't want to get hit in the face with a ball. So it's just, it's picking and choosing what the MLB wants to do, and the vagueness of it is the worst part because they don't even know what's legal now.
exactly. And for a long time it was like, oh, if someone's using a sticky or pine tar, or pitchers using pine tar, it was always like spider tack or something of that nature. But the sticky stuff, I feel like it's way too much of a bad rep, because like Tyler Glass now said that his, sticky stuff of choice is sunscreen and rosin, which is like, hey,
How can you ban that?
rosin is literally given to pitchers. It's on the mound for every single game. And what he can't use sunscreen? Like it's they're in this. And I think one of the sketchiest parts about what MLB is doing is, so technically this has been a rule for all of MLB history. Like the pitchers cannot use foreign substances has been a rule for 100+ years. But the thing is, MLB has never come out and said we are going to enforce this rule. Like it's just basically been, if it's blatantly obvious, we're gonna call you out on it. The famous incident is, Michael Pineda a couple years ago, where he literally just had it drenched on his arm. Um, and so what MLB did this year, they didn't have to go to the players and talk about this rule. Like the MLB has a players association, every professional sports organization does, that basically works with the front office to see, what rules want to be instituted. But since this was a rule, this foreign substance rule has been a thing for 100+ years. The players had no say in what just got announced for for MLB's new sticky stuff rule, which I think is terrible, terrible. Which, I mean, technically they didn't have to, but I, just MLB has shown this trend in the last years where they're just not willing to work with players, and it's just not a good look at all.
Yeah, it's really frustrating because the players have said it multiple times, and they just don't have any power, it seems like. And it's just like, that just sounds like corruption to me at the front office. And Rob Manfred is a huge part of that. And I want to call him out again because like everybody seems to not like him, but nobody can really do anything about it. But it's just really frustrating because he seems like he can just do whatever he wants if it's the right or wrong choice, and he just doesn't get any flack. Well, he gets called out all the time, but nothing really happens to him. Um, and it's been really frustrating because it's been going on for a while, and MLB has a chance to get back into like the mainstream sports of things and get a lot more popularity, and it seemed like it was going that direction. And this bad press is good press is what people say, so maybe it is. Maybe this is good for the MLB actually, but it just seems like an opportunity that he could just throw away if he continues what he's doing right now.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Carlos Rodon because what he said I think was great was if 90% of pitchers are using this sticky stuff and you're going to give them suspensions, but you're not going to do anything for the Houston Astros, that makes
Yep.
sense, you know? But it's gonna be interesting to see where this takes us. We've already seen injuries happen because of it. Injury to one of the biggest young pitchers in the MLB, which is terrible to see. You know, he pretty much went off. I don't know if you've seen that clip, but I
Yeah.
recommend what. Yeah, it's like 4 minutes. He went off on him, and he was like, "Dude, my lifelong goal is to be an all-star Cy Young winner, and now that's thrown out the window because I tried to, do what they told me to do." And
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, he was on it. He was having an all. I don't know. He wasn't Cy Young leading, but he was up there, and he was up there in terms of all
Yeah.
stars. So it's
And
it's terrible
another
to see.
example of that, I don't know if this had to do with it, but it seems like it is, or it's just a weird coincidence. Shane Bieber, my favorite pitcher on the Indians, he got injured again today, or it was like last week, his last start, for like 10 or 15 days. And I don't know if it's because he didn't use sticky stuff or not. But it came right as at the same time of Glass now, and he had a bad start that time, and it seemed like he could have been just going cold turkey like Glass now did. And I mean, it makes sense if you're using different muscles and everything, and you injure yourself because of this. That would make sense. Pitchers aren't used to doing this, so it's scary because Shane Bieber won the Cy Young last year. Like those are two
Mm.
pitchers that are really, really important for fans and everything. And they're some of your best people that are getting injured. So yeah, they need to fix something.
Yeah, I think the best move for the MLB now is I I don't see it happening, but I honestly think they just have to say in this next weekend their best thing to do would be to say this rule we heard your feedback and this rule will be implemented at the beginning of next season
Yeah, I agree.
because I mean I don't think there's maybe 5 to 10% of MLB players are fully in support of this rule. It,
Yeah.
it's it's pretty out there that it's very you know again the players are very against it,
Yeah.
and I think that's the best thing to do. And in the off season, work with the players. The players are the ones that are affected by this, and the ones that are going to have to change their game based on what you're choosing to do. So, and one more thing I wanted. So you mentioned earlier the pine tar on the bat. And one of the things Trevor Bauer brought up was say a guy like Justin Turner who just loads his bat with pine tar, and you see he does a thing like in his warm-ups where it ends up getting on his jersey. Like if he, gets some of that on his fingers or whatever, he hits a home run, then he high fives Trevor Bauer and Trevor Bauer gets pine tar on his hands. Like what like how do you he has to go
Yeah.
wash his hands, then he has to get it checked again. Like there's just so many holes in this rule that just make it so hard for the players to follow that I feel like we're either going to see a massive string of suspensions or absolutely no suspensions at all, which I feel like there's because umpires aren't trained to do this. Umpires aren't trained to find what sticky stuff is. It's just the MLB has put themselves in a very tough position.
Yeah. There's no way that this should be happening in the middle of the season. That's
Yeah.
basically the bottom line is they should not make changes in the middle of the season after saying that you're not going to do it. In the summer, do something, but it's just not a good time.
In the off season, you
In the
mean?
off season, do something. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's our spiel. It's kind of really a shit show right now with the with what
Yep.
where MLB is right now. Pitchers don't like it. Hitters are basically like listen to the pitchers at this point, and MLB is just doing their own thing. Um, so yeah, I'm sure there's going to be more stuff coming as soon as, this is actually enforced. We'll see if pitchers suck, if, umpires actually, go out for inning check-ins. I don't know. And also none of this helps pace of play, which has been MLB's, thing the last couple of years, going out to check pitchers randomly throughout the game. Nobody wants to see that. That's not entertaining. That's not what baseball should be going towards at this point, which is a whole nother discussion that this is just kind of putting them, it's like one step forward, two steps back with the MLB. So that's where they are now. It's just, again, we'll see. It hasn't been enforced yet, but people already hate it, which is never a good sign. Again, it's going to be a kind of a quicker episode. So we've got one last segment, and that is, I mean, I guess it's kind of in the same realm that it's just like something happening league wide that is just bad. And that's in the NBA. Again, we are in the middle of the playoffs. There's just been a lot more injuries than usual. Usually with the NBA and with mainly the NBA, the majority of injuries come towards the end of the season and in the playoffs just because of, normal wear and tear, stuff like that. But this NBA offseason was the shortest in professional sports history, which no doubt had something to do with it. Just going through, these are just the superstars that got hurt in the playoffs only. Anthony Davis had his groin injury. Obviously was a big hit to the Lakers against the Suns in the first round. Kawhi just recently, they're kind of being gray about it, but it's probably a ACL injury. Kyrie Irving with an ankle injury. James Harden with a hamstring injury. Mike Conley with a hamstring injury. That's a big hit for the Jazz. Chris Paul is now in health and safety protocols, which is kind of different, but still, it's another star missing time. Joel Embiid right now is playing through a meniscus tear. And then, the last one, Donovan Mitchell missed one game at the beginning of the first round. He hasn't really been affected since then. But it's just, you can't help but look at that short offseason and say that's the reason for it.
Yeah, that's a lot of superstars that have missed time. And the playoffs are a lot worse when superstars aren't playing. Like, that's an obvious statement, but like, it's true. Like, the Clippers game yesterday or 2 days ago or whatever, without Kawhi, like, it was exciting because the Clippers ended up winning, but I was like, man, this sucks. Like, I'm not even rooting for the Clippers, but like, I just want to see Kawhi playing this because it's just got an asterisk next to it. And like the Lakers probably lost, or at least didn't go farther because of Anthony Davis injury and because of LeBron before. Like, he was not 100% either.
Yeah.
And you could call it like the bubble guppies or whatever they're calling, like the Miami Heat. Yeah. But Miami and the Lakers were affected the most by this, and they both had a ton of injuries this year, and they both got eliminated in the first round. And I don't know if it would have been different for like the Miami Heat, but they got swept, and that did not seem like the same team that we saw. And the Lakers got eliminated too. This is different from the MLB situation because it was something that was voted on and decided, and the players decided with it. But there was like outspoken people like LeBron who said that this was going to happen, and he was completely right about it. But it's just the difference is, like, I don't know what the correct thing would have been to do, because if they had a shorter season, then they would have lost out on a lot of money. But it seemed like it would have been worth it at this point. So hindsight is 2020, but it still sucks to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Anthony Davis groin injury completely affected that series. The 2 games he played, they pretty much dominated the Suns. Kawhi's injury, Clippers actually played very well without him, so we'll see how that ends up. But I mean, Kyrie being out, James Harden being banged up has really affected the Nets. Mike Conley being out is a huge hit for the Jazz that I don't think enough people really understand how big of a impact he has on that team. Joel Embiid, he's playing well, yes, but I feel like he's playing a lot more passive because of that meniscus tear.
Yeah.
So it's just again, like you said, it's a lot different because it's tough to say what you could have done. Obviously, the main thing is, you know, you could have pushed the start of the season to sometime in January, which there were a couple of people pushing for, but it seemed like they really wanted to start at Christmas time for that
Hmm.
kind of added revenue and boost. Um, but I think this just shows how important the off season is and how you can't really just say, "Oh yeah, it's a." And I know this probably, I mean, knock on wood, something like COVID probably won't happen again for a long time, hopefully. But and I know that that's why this happened, obviously. But it just shows that you can't be stingy with off season and recovery time for professional sports organizations like the NBA. Like
Yeah.
they need that time.
Yeah. I think this is more of like a learning moment for sports. Um, because like I don't think that they made the wrong decision per se, because like you can't say if they had a shorter off season, if or a longer off season, this wouldn't have happened. I don't think it would have, but I think it shows them that like the next time they'll do that, they will have a longer off season. Um, and so it's very different from what we just talked about with the MLB, because I think that the NBA is a lot better overall. Like they will change and they will adapt, and I think this is a situation where they will learn from it a lot. Um, but yeah, it it's just a bad situation really for this one. Like you can't really be mad at anybody because a lot of the players wanted to play. Like I know I wanted to watch my Cavaliers play. They didn't play for like 10 months or something. Well, the Lakers had like a 2 month off season.
Yeah.
The Cavs didn't play for like almost a year. So it was really different for a lot of teams because some of them didn't even come back for the bubble. Um, but yeah, the whole situation just sucked for this.
Mhm.
And yeah, the playoffs are suffering because of it. Another guy we didn't even mention is Jamal Murray.
Yeah.
He's completely out, and he played in the conference finals, so he had a pretty short offseason too. Not as short as the Lakers or Heat, but like just 2 or 3 weeks more than them, and he was out for the entire playoffs, and that's probably why the Nuggets didn't go to the next round. So
Yeah.
it just sucks.
Yeah, and kind of shifting this into bringing the two segments together is MLB and NBA. The NBA has done historically and continues to do a lot better job at working with the players and figuring out what's best for everybody. And I think Adam Silver did a phenomenal job with the bubble. And if we're being honest, he did he did as really as well as he could with this whole off-season situation. It's just there wasn't much that he could do to prevent this. Whereas in MLB, it just seems like there's a complete disconnect between players and higher ups, which is something you never want because you know it's not fun to watch players do something they don't want to do. Like
Hmm.
the whole fun behind Trevor Bauer is he goes out there, he does his thing, and he's an exciting player because he'll stir up controversy or he'll make this celebration or he'll wear these cleats that make fun of the Astros. Like, and then you have the MLB the next day going down and fining him for everything that he does, and then he's like, oh, well then why would I do that again? That
Yeah.
it's just I just feel like having a sports organization that allows players to do what they want while taking in their opinion on what the entire league ends up doing, that's what you need to do.
Yeah. I totally agree. And even like 10 or 15 years ago, outspoken players in the NBA were kind of looked down upon.
Right.
And that's completely changed. And it's awesome. Like the league is so much better for it. But I just really hope that's the direction that the MLB goes in and even the NFL goes in. Because it becomes so much better and the rules become more transparent for everybody. The game just becomes more like enjoyable because you can watch like the Bauer controversy or whatever. And I
Right.
would love to see him wearing like Astros cleats out there. Like even if he
Yeah.
played the Astros and wore them, like that would be awesome.
Hmm.
And even if the Astros like destroyed him, that would be like, hey, I mean, good for them. but just like finding people for being exciting basically is just not the right situation or not the right step to go in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I applaud the NBA for at least going in that direction. I think that they might have been able to handle this differently, which would be a little bit better, but can't be too mad at them because it was a tough situation. But yeah, I agree that the MLB definitely needs to change the same way.
Yeah, I saw something comparing. They basically said Fernando Tatis is the Allen Iverson of the MLB. Basically, coming in here as a young guy and he just starts doing things nobody's ever
Yeah.
seen before. And I feel like, not even just Tatis, Acuna, Soto, like we've got all this young talent that has so much, excitement around them. And that's the direction the MLB is heading. And I don't know if MLB itself needs better. I mean, obviously does. I've been on the fire Rob Manfred train since like 2016, but they need to figure out something that they get better at marketing their players. They get better at letting their players do what they want to do, and just I don't know. I just feel like those two things put together will make the MLB so much bigger attraction to people who just look at baseball as this boring old sport.
Yeah.
It's just that's what's needed is these guys like if you ask, I don't even know, someone who doesn't watch baseball at all, they might know like Babe Ruth, like, and they don't know a
Yeah.
guy like Fernando Tatis, who's literally, I think, the face of baseball right now. So, and that's what they're missing. They're just missing a front office that can do that.
Yeah, I really like that comparison because even like Rob Manfred is kind of like how David Stern was in the NBA. Like David Stern banned Allen Iverson and the whole league from like wearing chains or
Yeah,
something.
he
Like,
wore his chain like pregame.
yeah, but first of all, he was like a super racist guy. So I mean,
Yeah.
there was that part of it too. But like when new leadership came in, the league did a lot better, and I think that the MLB could do the same exact thing. And even though they're behind, like all the new players are exciting, like you just said. Like they have such a great opportunity to do this. So hopefully.
Yeah, that's yeah. Hopefully, MLB being my favorite, baseball being my favorite sport. It's tough to see all these other leagues like encouraging their players and having so much excitement around it. Whereas, don't get me wrong, within like the MLB community, baseball's buzzing right now. Like there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but it's just there's nothing outside of the baseball community, if you kind of know what I mean. Like there's not much getting put on like Bleacher Report rather than what the NBA, obviously the NBA is getting most of that right now. But it's tough, and hopefully we're gonna start trending in the direction where baseball starts to become more and more in the mainstream. But yeah, that's it. Again, it was a very short episode. We're lucky Logan didn't cut out on us. But I enjoyed this episode. This was fun.
It's a good talk.
There's a lot of great things, bad things technically going on, but they're great to talk about. And we've got hope that they will solve themselves. Maybe Rob Manfred will get out of there.
Please.
But yeah, again, MLB sticky stuff, NBA injuries, and then it kind of just turned into the MLB needs to do better.
Yep.
Thank you so much for listening / watching, whatever you did on YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. Again, follow us on all our social media accounts. Drop a like if you want us to try to do this podcast in person. Gonna have to get some equipment for that, but I think that'd be a lot more fun. But yeah, is there anything else you got to say to the people, Logan?
Hey, I mean, if you want to comment on Instagram, like fire Rob Manfred or something, that would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
What should happen.
Let's start the movement. Even though that movement's definitely been started for a long time.
It's been happening for a while.
But yeah, for my co-host Logan Ring, thank you so much for listening to the World of Sports podcast. I am your host, Diego Sandoval, signing off.